In more than 20 years as a journalist, I've traveled across Zambia and around the world, telling the stories of ordinary people. I have collaborated with friends to investigate theft of funds at the Zambia National Farmers Union. I have investigated environmental disasters across the country. And I have followed the reports of young African girls recruited into Russia's Alabuga project. But among all the investigations I have worked on, one story stands above the rest. It is the story of Grandy Ntumbo, a whistleblower who exposed the theft of more than 5 billion kwacha of public money at Zambia's Ministry of Finance.
I'm a chartered certified accountant, and in 2006 I joined the Ministry of Finance as an internal auditor, and I was promoted up to principal internal auditor, Ministry of Finance, in December 2019. My first assignment was the forensic audit of the Ministry of General Education. It was during that investigation that we discovered that millions in terms of Zambian kwacha was being embezzled by permanent secretaries, ministers, and other government officials. They were actually getting those allowances. Goods were not being supplied, and allowances were just being withdrawn without having to travel.
At that moment, he faced a choice. He could stay silent. He could protect himself and carry on with life. Or he could speak out. Knowing the consequences, he chose to speak out.
I told myself I'm a professional, I'm a patriotic Zambian. The lives of the public, I have to protect public interest. And therefore, I reported the bribe. One of the officers offered me a bribe of 8,000 kwacha, and then he paid a down payment straight to my bank account. He deposited that money and then asked me to falsify a report. So, of course, the government institutions, the law enforcement agencies recorded the transactions. And then, since I had reported to the Anti-Corruption Commission,
many of us like to believe we'll do the same, but the truth is different. When we are confronted with corruption, it is easier to remain silent and hope someone else will act. But silence comes at a cost. When honest people stay quiet, corruption grows stronger, and eventually everyone pays the price. Ntumbo refused to remain silent. Today, he and his family continue to bear the heavy personal cost of that decision.
It's been extremely hard, particularly after blowing the whistle. It became increasingly difficult day after day with the retaliations going on. For example, a few months ago, one of my twin boys had an emergency. We had to rush him to the hospital, and then we found my NEMA scheme, because my salary hasn't been going there. I couldn't cater for his emergency. About a year earlier, we had moved myself and my children, my dependent children, onto my wife's NEMA scheme. But then imagine that night, we were only told that a government agent had deleted myself and my children from my wife's NEMA scheme. So those are some of the extreme challenges that I faced. But by that time, the Anti-Corruption Commission had begun discussions with Ministry of Finance that the Whistleblowers Protection Act prohibits them from doing anything that will result in victimization. So when the Anti-Corruption Commission saw that there was so much pressure, a lot of phone calls from Ministry of Finance coming as high as the Secretary to the Treasury to the Anti-Corruption Commission, accusing me of various things, and also trying to move me and so forth. The Director General, Anti-Corruption Commission, the acting Director General at that time, Mr. Mushula Silomesi, called me to have a discussion, which took the whole day. And then eventually I had to review to them, I had to make additional disclosures that for 30 years at the Ministry of Finance, there has been, civil servants have been sharing money from what was popularly known as the secret account, which this is an account on which the Treasury keeps monies that are intended to pay government debt and investments. Even at the time I joined government, I was aware that was what was happening. But the difference now was that I was at Ministry of Finance, and amounts from that account were being shared to everybody, including myself. So since I had the evidence and I was receiving that money, and I alerted the law enforcement agencies on myself receiving the money and asking their advice on what I should do with that money, I had to disclose to them, including the amount which I had at that time in my account. But of course, they never did anything. So briefly, that's the background of what happened.
As Zambia prepares to elect new leaders this year, many people are searching for a political savior. But perhaps we are asking the wrong question. Instead of asking who will save Zambia, maybe we should ask why we fail to protect the people who are already trying to save it. People like Ntumbo.
I did what I did. I had to make public interest disclosures, but little did I know that I wasn't going to get support from State House. As you could see, I wrote a letter to the president as soon as he came into office. I wrote letters to cabinet, to the secretary, to the cabinet. They were stamped for receiving. The only cooperation that I got was from the acting Director General, ACC at that time, Mr. Mushula Silomesi. But of course, shortly he was removed and there was a lot of interference. Yeah, so I think it's really been very disappointing, particularly to see that the current government has no respect for the rule of law, which can be proved by them failing to obey the orders of the Court of Appeal. The orders were given on 13th December 2023. The church mother bodies had to see the Minister of Finance, Dr. Stumbeko Msokotwane. They went on now to see the President last year in December 2025 and present evidence of how I was mistreated as a whistleblower. So the President was receptive, but they got frustrated from his response, and eventually nothing has been done to date.
Our country does not simply need more politicians. It needs more men and women with the courage to choose integrity over comfort, justice over personal gain, and truth over fear. Because Zambia will not be transformed by speeches alone. It will be transformed by citizens who are willing to stand up for what is right, even when the personal cost is high. Ntumbo did exactly that. His story deserves to be heard.
I think it's quite shocking to find that, to see or observe that the politicians are not talking about corruption as something that is a cancer to our economy, that is causing the lack of development in our economy. And if they talk about it, like we saw in the new Dawn administration, they talked about it very strongly in the opposition. But when they are there, you can see, like the big case in the Ministry of Finance, they've decided to 100% be very quiet about it. At some point, I will tell you, one of the people that were investigating the case at the anti-corruption, one of the key investigators had to ask me to withdraw the case from the Anti-Corruption Commission so that I could reconcile with my bosses. Here is an investigator asking you to withdraw a case which is before the Anti-Corruption Commission. I just look at that. So then you find for other smaller cases, there was a case of a clinical officer who got some pecuniary advantage over state resources. He was promptly arrested and took to court. But then look at the big fishes in the Ministry of Finance. Nobody wants to touch them. And nobody is ready, including the current government. They've shown no ability, I think, to look at what matters most in the fight against corruption. Regardless of the retaliation that has come my way, despite the delays in the court of law, despite the rejection and everything else, given a chance, I would still do that again. I would still choose to blow the whistle, because that is the only way we could move our country forward.